Yo, what's up, guys? It's Aquagon. I'm back with another video, and today I wanted to talk about Grace, and I also wanted to talk about some other generics because generics are kind of like a really big topic in the Buddyfight community right now. And the new set that comes with the super robots, the super warriors, Ball, and Dragon's Y, that releases tomorrow. This is recorded on May 27th, so at midnight tonight the new set's going to be released. We already have some pre-orders for Grace as well as all the other cards, and Grace right now is $12 a piece on TC Gen. It was originally at 10 and then it sold out and then it got moved to 12. Salton Games I think had it at $8. No, it had it at $10, but the average price for Grace right now is at $10. So first let's actually talk about Grace itself. So Grace is a card that's like really helpful in the meta. When you play on BFA or just when you're playing the game in general, almost every single deck runs Grace in the main board. Some people run it in sideboard, but it's always a main board to protect yourself against Time Dragons and Lost World with the Vanity. The one that comes in Glory Valiant just boots off 2 cards from field, so you kind of need Grace. You can also cast Grace. I think you can cast it more than once per turn. Grace has 2 effects. The first one is it just nullifies all card damage, so it completely counters Imperial Core, which is kind of sad. I like Imperial Core, but it's understandable because Imperial Core could kill turn 1. So maybe but still, it could just also get rid of Penetrate. It deals with Spectral Strike. It deals with the damage that you take from the new Narrow Lance, that the Lost World one that comes in Glory Valiant that deals 3 damage at end of turn. It just counters that. It counters the OG Narrow Lance from Star Dragon World. I think it does 2 damage at end of turn 2. It just counters everything that has to do with taking damage by card effects, and it also stops your cards from leaving the field by opponent's card effects, which is really good, like I said, used in every single deck. But the problem with Grace is that it's used in every single deck, so everyone wants it. But the other thing is that it's a rare. It's not a triple rare, it's not a double rare, it's not a secret, it's not a SP, or any of those like kind of rare cards. It's just a rare. So why is it $10 a piece, $12 a piece? Some of you might be saying, well, obviously it's because every single deck uses it. But the thing is that it's just a rare card. So personally, I don't think that it should be $10, $12 a piece. And the thing is that every single deck runs at least 3 of it. If you're running Grace, you're running 3 Grace. I don't see people run 2 Grace. If you do run 2 Grace, you don't really draw it much. Like if I play Loyalty and Grace, it's like a 3 Grace, 2 Loyalty. But yeah, it's a problem for people that play budget, but I really shouldn't be complaining about it because budget players are like 15% of the community. But I think that the price itself is kind of a problem, and Grace is really good, but the thing is we haven't seen it in any tournaments, obviously because of COVID. So we'll see that once we get out of once we get out of quarantine and stuff and tournaments reopen, we'll actually see Grace being used. So hopefully Grace will drop down in price because the thing is right now pre-order prices are up, but when the set comes out it might be reduced. And a lot of people are actually pre-ordering Grace, but personally if I do get Grace, I'm waiting for it to come to 5 a piece, or I'm waiting for the people are thinking that there's a reboot going to be announced. I just want to see the price drop. I'm not buying it for 12 a piece because if I'm running 3, that's 36, and then plus the taxes and all that stuff. So, because the shipping is really expensive, obviously, because of the virus. But I wanted to talk about the other generic cards today, because I just talked too much about Grace. So, the main generic cards that we see are Buddy Block, Grace, Loyalty, Recover Veil, and Sweet Happy Time. So, all of these do different things. I think the most common generic that I see is Grace and Buddy Block. I don't really see people run Loyalty. It's a sideboard. It's a really good card. I think Recover Veil is a lot more popular than Loyalty, but Buddy Block reduces damage by 3, or if your opponent's card's attacked 4 or more times this turn, you will not be dealt damage by attacks, which is really good. Um, it just completely counters decks that restand during the final phase, because the thing is, if you have a phase ender that you can run, you'd want to use it, like Super Warriors of a phase ender at 3rd attack. I know Star Dragon World is a phase ender at 3rd attack that is just for the entire world, which is kind of crazy. I know that a lot of other decks have phase enders. I just can't really think of it off the top of my head. But Buddy Block is run in almost every deck because just stops attacks. If your opponent's cards restand during final phase, they're not going to be able to attack you again because if they do, they're not going to deal any damage. But the problem with Buddy Block is that your opponent could still target your monsters and just destroy them because you don't take attacks, but monsters could still be targeted and destroyed, which is a good balance. Also, Buddy Block is just a cheap card because the gauge cost is 1, as in cheap, like it doesn't cost anything. It costs 1 gauge to cast, so if you have more than 1 in your hand, you could save it for if your opponent's going to spell null. It's also kind of cheap in real life too. It's only like $1 or 2 a piece from last time I ordered Buddy Block. Next we have Loyalty. Loyalty is really good. You usually use it for your opponent can't call three more than 3 monsters, sorry. Which is really good. It's good against God Punks because God Punks usually call like 6 monsters in order to set up. They call a lot of die pans, and then they call the size 2 that rests and adds God Punks from drop to hand. A lot of Brawl Zeus calls too. This way you could just chip off gauge. But Loyalty counters the deck. Loyalty does really good against a lot of decks from what I've seen, but some decks like Max Dragons or Super Warriors aren't really affected by it too much. But it's still a good card. Cheap cost as well, 1 gauge. Recover Veil is really good. Recover Veil just stops your hand cards from getting discarded. Recover Veil also is a generic 2 gauge, which is really good. Has a lot of other effects too, which is good. And then Sweet Happy Time obviously just stops resting, can do minus 10k defense to opponent's monsters, and then it has another effect. But the thing I wanted to talk about in this video is that I like the generic cards because they're good for because some people like building old decks. Like we're in 2020, so obviously season 1 was a long time ago, but like sometimes I've seen people use season 1 decks. Like right now, I just built a Skull Warrior Lost deck because I think Skull Warrior could be a really good engine for Lost. Um, so I'm running like Buddy Block. I'm running a lot of generics in there because Skull Warriors don't really have a lot of generic good cards for themselves. There's no loyalty in Skull Warriors. They don't have an I don't think they have an anti-rest. They don't have a phase ender. Like all those cards are good for older decks, but the thing with generics, in my opinion, is that I think they kind of take away from deck building, because in Buddyfight, like at least in the start of the show, everyone like one of the main purposes was to be original and unique in the show and not to be doing what everyone else is doing, because you never really see people running the same cards in the show unless it's like a dragon shield or whatever. But the thing is, now every single person is running 3 grace, every single deck is running 3 grace. Loyalty has always been ran. I just think that, like, I don't know, it kind of takes out some of the originality of the game, and I think that the card itself is kind of pricey. I think that if Grace was like $3, like how Buddy Block is, like, a really cheap card, I think it wouldn't be as much of an issue. But the thing is that you're paying extra money just to counter stuff like Lost World and Time Dragons because they're so like not Time Dragons aren't OP anymore, but Lost World is really good. So you're just paying extra money to kind of counter like the top tier decks, which is a problem. It's part of the power creeping, and that's why people want to reboot, because things like Vanity are just really good. They just get rid of things on field, so you need to be paying $12 to buy 3 copies of Grace just to counter that. Even if, like, let's say you're running Max Dragons has a set spell that if a card would leave the field, you could if your Max Dragon monster would leave the field, you could just send that set spell to drop zone. Max Dragon monster stays on the field, but you do need to run cards like Grace so you can protect your Overcrest, and you need to run. Uh, you also need Grace for your item, and you need it for your monster because the set spell only stops it from leaving the field 1 time. If your opponent has 1 or more Vanity on the field, they could just keep swinging and swinging, especially if they're running Lost Agito X Vanity, which I don't see people run, but it's like a good combo because you give the Vanity triple attack, and then it could get rid of 1 Vanity could get rid of 6 cards on the field on your opponent's board, which is just ridiculous. I think that the generic cards are good. I'm not saying that they're bad at all. They're really good. They're really good for older decks. They like give people the freedom to kind of run older decks because they can make older decks definitely not viable in the ace meta, but they can make older decks like usable for fun. This way, it's not like, oh, well, I have an X deck, so I'm getting destroyed by ace decks. It makes like older decks more usable against ace decks, like I said. Like kind of late, for example, like Levatine is like an older deck, but if you're running cards like Loyalty and Levatine, you could stop your opponent from calling extra cards. You could use Grace to protect your items. Uh, you could also, yeah, you could just use Buddy Block to just stop the attacks, but they also have phase. They also have a phase ender. Legend World does. But I think that the generic cards are good for the game. I don't think that they're bad for it. I just think that if you're going to be making a generic card that like every deck needs, like Grace, I don't think that you should be charging $12. I don't think that it should be $12. Obviously, Bushiroad isn't charging you $12. Because the thing is, the card is a rare. If it was a triple rare, I could understand a $12 price tag. But then again, people would be complaining that the card is it's too rare. And also, the existence of Grace is decent because it makes cards in the newest set really cheap. Like, for example, Super Warriors are like an $80 deck, like 80 to 100 right now before the set releases, obviously. Um, Super Robots are insanely cheap. Satsuki is like $8 a piece, which you only need 4 or 5 Satsuki if you want to run Satsuki as Buddy, which you don't even have to because it's literally just gain 1 life, not that big of a deal. And there are other cards in the deck that you're constantly calling on. So it does make the new set like cheaper, which I think is pretty good. Only problem is Buddy Grandes is still 20 a piece, or 18 depending on where you're going. But yeah, I think that the generics are good for the game. I just think that it takes out some of the originality of the deck building. And I understand that it's too much work for Bushiroad to kind of add in a phase ender for every single deck. So obviously people are going to be running Buddy Block, but I think that we kind of see too many. We see too many of the same card in every single deck, and it's like, oh, maybe you're going to do something interesting with your deck. Nope, you're just going to run Grace. But it makes sense because Grace is one of the best cards in the game. But yeah, that's it for the video. If you agree with anything I said, then I guess comment below or whatever. Uh, probably like and share the video, subscribe if you want to. Peace.